Nobody expected the egg. The cargo manifest listed 16 sealed sample crates, all standard xenobiological collection from the outer survey drones. Rylan Cord had processed hundreds of those manifests. He opened each crate the same way, gloves on, scanner ready, mind somewhere else. Crate 12 stopped him cold. Something inside it was warm. Not the faint warmth of a chemical reaction or a malfunctioning heat pack. Warm like a living thing. Warm like a heartbeat. You could almost feel through the shell of the container. He set down his scanner, pulled back the foam packing, and found it sitting there between two sealed soil samples like it belonged. An egg roughly the size of a watermelon, pale silver with faint gold lines running across it in patterns that shifted when the light hit them from a different angle. He stood there for a long moment. Then he called Commander Adra Fenn. She arrived in 4 minutes, looked at the egg for about 10 seconds, and said, "How warm?" 38.6, Ryland said. "Stable. Consistent." Finn folded her arms. Protocol said isolated. Flag it to the Galactic Council. Wait for instructions. Protocol also said a lot of things about frontier stations that the people who wrote Protocol had never actually lived on a frontier station. She looked at the egg again. The gold lines pulsed once, slow and quiet. "Study it," Finn said. Quietly. Ryland studied it. He barely slept for 2 days. The xenobiology database gave him almost nothing. The shell composition matched the recorded biochemical signature of a species cataloged under the name Solari WRM, a creature listed in most galactic databases as mythological. No confirmed living specimens. No verified eggs. 3 grainy long-range photographs, and a lot of ancient folklore from species old enough to remember when the galaxy looked different. On the 3rd morning, the egg cracked. Rylan was right there. He had not planned to be. He had come in early to run temperature checks and ended up staying because the cracks spread too fast and too deliberately to walk away from. The shell did not shatter. It opened, piece by piece, like something very small and very certain was taking its time. The creature that came out was about the size of a large house cat, soaking wet, covered in membrane that it shook off with irritated little flicks of its wings. The wings were too big for its body. The tail was too long. Its scales were silver gold, same colors as the egg, and its eyes, when it finally opened them, were the deep, warm color of old copper. It looked at Rylan. Rylan looked at it. It sneezed, stumbled forward on legs that were not fully coordinated yet, climbed directly up his arm, and bit his ID badge hard enough to leave marks. He named it Dova. He was not sure why that name. It arrived in his head the moment he saw the copper eyes, and it did not leave. Commander Finn came by an hour later and found Rylan sitting at his workstation with a baby dragon chewing on a stylus and leaving tiny scorch marks on his desk. "It breathes fire?" Finn said. "Small amounts," Rylan said. "More like a warm sneeze. It seems involuntary." Finn watched Dova try to catch the reflection of a ceiling light with her paw. She said. Rylan looked up. "I said she," Finn repeated and walked out. The station crew discovered Dova in pieces over the following week. Navigator Bowen found her first, sitting in Rylan's chair looking very serious. The engineering team found her second, mostly because she had followed the sound of machinery into the lower maintenance bay and could not figure out how to get back. Medical Officer Nara found her third, which involved Dova stealing a thermal blanket and refusing to give it back for almost an hour. Nobody filed an official complaint. Bowen told Rylan, privately, "You know we'll have to hand her over eventually. To the council. Maybe to whatever species she belongs to." Rylan was watching Dova chase her own tail in a tight circle next to his equipment rack. "Eventually," he said. Bowen looked at him. "You already know you're not going to." Rylan said nothing. Dova stopped chasing her tail, looked up at both of them with an expression that was far too knowing for something that had been alive for 11 days, and made a sound in the back of her throat. Not quite a growl. More like an engine warming up, low and rhythmic and oddly comfortable to hear. She had been listening to the crew from the moment she opened her eyes. Rylan could tell. The way her head tilted when someone spoke. The way she tracked conversations across a room the way most creatures only tracked movement or food. She was learning something. He did not know what yet. He would find out later. Much later. When it mattered most. For now, she was small, she was strange, and she had somehow decided with the iron certainty of a creature 10 days old. That Rylan cord was hers. He could not honestly say he disagreed. 6 months passed the way time passes on a frontier station, fast on busy days, slow on quiet ones, and gone before anyone could account for it properly. Dova grew. Not dramatically. She was still small enough to fit across Ryland's shoulders like a very opinionated scarf, but the gangly, uncoordinated hatchling was gone. She moved with purpose now. She held her head at a particular angle when she was thinking through something, and she thought through things constantly. Her eyes tracked everything. Her ears, two flat crests behind her jaw, swiveled toward sounds the way a dish antenna pivots toward a signal. She was always listening. Ryland kept careful notes. It was his job to keep notes on everything, and Dova gave him more material than any xenobiological specimen he had ever worked with. Her empathic sensitivity was the strangest part. 3 times in 6 months she had lifted her head and gone tense, every scale along her spine rising slightly, before any station alarm triggered. The first time Ryland thought it was coincidence. The second time he noted it. By the third time, when her reaction came 90 seconds before a pressure seal warning in the lower bay, he was already watching her with a timer running. He wrote in his log, "She feels it before the instruments do. I am not sure what she is sensing. I am not sure the instruments measure the same thing she does." The supply ship arrived in the 5th month carrying food, spare parts, 3 new crew transfers, and one piece of news that Commander Finn read alone in her office for 15 minutes before she called a senior staff meeting. The Kareth Dominion had filed a resource claim on the gas giant below. Formal, legal, registered with the Galactic Council under the Contested Zones provision. Vantage stations sat inside the contested boundary. The Kareth had the right, under Council law, to dispatch an assessment fleet. The Council response to Finn's objection had been careful, polite, and deeply unhelpful. She told her staff the facts plainly. She did not frame it as a crisis yet. But she told them the facts, and everyone in the room understood what the facts meant. After the meeting, Ryland went back to his lab. Dova was on his desk, curled into a compact ring, watching the door. She had been there the whole time, and when Ryland sat down she uncurled and climbed into his lap and settled there with the particular heaviness of a creature that has decided her weight is exactly what you need right now. Ryland sat with his hands on her scales. She was warm in the way that stones hold heat, deep and steady and patient. He started researching the Kareth. He also kept researching the Solari WYRM, which had become something of a second occupation. The more he dug, the more he found fragments, not in current databases, but in older records. Species that had been charting the galaxy for thousands of years sometimes left records that sat untranslated in Council archives. He pulled 3 of them, cross-referenced. Read slowly. What he found about the Solari made him sit very still for a long time. They were not extinct. They were old. There was a difference. Species that had been spacefaring before humanity existed still remembered them. The Kareth, in particular, aggressive, resource-focused, efficient, had a single entry in their historical religious text that a xenolinguist had translated 50 years ago and filed under mythology. The translation was blunt: the Solari do not warn. If you meet one, you have already made your decision. Ryland looked at Dova. Dova looked back at him with her copper eyes and made the warm engine sound. He began paying closer attention to what she was absorbing from the crew. She had a particular interest in human speech, not the informational kind, not commands or questions, but the emotional kind. The things people said when they were at the edge of something. The words that came out when someone was scared and still moving forward, or exhausted and still at their post, or looking at an impossible situation and not walking away from it. He caught her practicing sounds. Late at night, when she thought the lab was empty, he had learned to sit very still in the dark. She would open her jaw and push air through it in careful, controlled ways, trying to shape something. Her vocal structure was not built for human language, but she was trying anyway, with the patient focus of something that understood the word matters even if the mouth is wrong. She was trying to learn one word in particular. He could hear the shape of it, but not the sound of it yet. Not quite. Bowen stopped by late one evening and leaned in the doorway. "Fleet sensors picked up something," he said. "Long range. Transit signatures." Ryland looked up. "How many?" "Enough," Bowen said. "They're not weeks out." He paused. "They're days." Ryland looked at Dova. She had stopped practicing. She was very still, her crest flat, her copper eyes fixed on something that was not in the room. Sensing something the instruments had not reported yet. Reading the pressure of what was coming through whatever channel ancient things used when they needed to know the shape of the future. Then she turned her head and looked directly at Rylan. And for just a moment, a fraction of a second, she opened her jaw and the word was almost there. Almost right. Almost ready. Not yet. But almost. 27 ships came out of transit drive at the edge of the system and stopped. They did not fire. They did not broadcast a greeting. They simply held position in a wide formation, dark against the star field, engines idling at a level that said we are not in a hurry because we do not need to be. Rylan pulled the visual feed on his secondary screen and kept it there. The Kareth warships were not beautiful. They were built the way a fist is built, dense, deliberate, designed for a single purpose. Commander Finn put the station on yellow alert and waited. The waiting was its own kind of pressure. The Kareth fleet made them wait for 4 hours before Admiral Gru opened a channel. His face filled the main display in the operations center. He was broad across the jaw, with the flat, forward-set eyes that Kareth had developed from centuries of being the kind of species that chased things down. He spoke in Galactic Standard with a slight compression in his vowels that made every sentence sound like it had already been decided before he said it. The terms were simple. Vantage Station would acknowledge Kareth mineral rights over the gas giant. A Kareth administrative team would arrive within 48 hours to establish what Gru called an oversight presence. The station would continue normal operations under Kareth observation. All data collected by the station's survey drones would be shared with Kareth Command in real time. It was not a negotiation. He presented it the way someone presents the weather. Here is what is happening. Here is what you will do in response. Finn said, "We will need time to review the proposal formally." Gru said, "You have 24 hours. He closed the channel. Finn turned to her staff. "Nearest human fleet is 9 days out. We have nothing in system that can challenge 27 warships. I am open to ideas." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Ryland said, "I might have one." He had been working on it since the night Bowen told him the fleet was days away. He had pulled every piece of research on the Kareth he could find, military capacity, negotiating history, territorial behavior. And then he had cross-referenced it with what he had found about the Solari. The Kareth historical texts were the key. Not many species still held beliefs that functioned like law, but the Kareth did. Certain things were coded into their culture so deeply that violating them was not a political calculation. It was something closer to biological impossibility. And at the top of that list, recorded in the oldest Kareth documents that archaeologists had found scratched into stone on their homeworld, was a category called the untouchable, beings or places that carried the mark of a Solari WIREM. The Kareth did not fear many things. They feared the Solari the way you fear something that existed before fear had a name. Rylan explained all of this to Finn. Then he said, "If Dover is seen, on their sensors, on visual, transmitted directly to Gru's bridge, they may stop." Bowen said, immediately, "That is a very large maybe." "It is," Rylan agreed. "You want to use a 6-month-old dragon as a diplomatic shield," Bowen said. "I want to use the fact that she is a Solari WIREM, and they know what that means," Rylan said. "She does not have to do anything. She just has to be seen." Finn was quiet for a long time. She was the kind of commander who thought before she spoke and meant what she said when she did. What is the risk to her? None, if we keep her aboard. I want to transmit a visual, her in the lab, clear lighting, direct feed to the Kareth flagship. No contact, no proximity. Just let them see what we have. "What we have," Bowen repeated, with a look that was almost a laugh. "What has chosen to be here," Ryland said. And that was a different thing entirely, and everyone in the room knew it. Finn said, "Do it." Ryland went back to the lab. Dova was on her usual perch on top of the equipment rack, watching the ventilation grate with the focused attention she gave to things that moved or might move. He sat down across from her, and she turned her copper eyes to him. He told her, quietly, as he always told her things, not because she understood every word, but because she understood tone and intention and the weight of what was real, that something big was coming, and that he needed her to be seen. Dova held his gaze for a moment. Then she stretched out along the top of the equipment rack, extended her wings to their full span, raised her head to its full height, and sat perfectly still. She looked, at that moment, like something very small that was very certain it was not small. Ryland set up the visual feed and transmitted it to the Kareth flagship. Then he waited. The response came 11 minutes later. Not from Gru. From the fleet's second ship, relayed to the first. A burst transmission in Kareth that the station's translator rendered imperfectly, but well enough. Query, query, query. What is the origin of that creature? Repeat. What is the origin of that creature? Finn looked at Ryland. Ryland looked at Dova. Dova looked at the camera like she had been looking at cameras her entire short life and found them mildly beneath her attention. Tell them the truth, Ryland said. Exactly the truth. Then the second sensor alert came in, and it was not from the direction of the Kareth fleet. It was from Deep System. Something enormous was arriving from the dark between stars, and the station's computer could not classify the drive signature because the drive signature was not in any database built in the last 10,000 years. They came from the direction of the old stars. 7 of them, moving in a loose formation the way mountains might move if mountains had somewhere to be, slow, vast, certain. The smallest was twice the length of a Kareth warship. The largest made the warships look like objects left behind in a drawer by accident. They had no drive signature that matched anything in recorded galactic history, because the galactic history in the station's database started roughly 6,000 years ago, and these things were older than that. Solari WYRMS. Ancient ones. Elders. The station's proximity alarms went off, then off again, as Finn silenced them manually, because alarms implied a threat that could be addressed, and there was nothing aboard Vantage Station that could address what was now entering the system. The Kareth fleet went very quiet. Not quiet the way a fleet goes quiet before an attack. Quiet the way something goes quiet when it is trying very hard to remember if it has done anything wrong recently. Ryland was still in the lab when the pulse hit. It was not a sound. It was not a transmission. It moved through the station the way deep water moves, all at once, from every direction, without a wave to point to. Every person on the station felt it differently. Bowen described it later as a hand pressing flat against his chest. Nara the medic said it was like suddenly remembering a dream she had never actually had. Finn said she felt it as weight, not unpleasant, just very real, the way gravity reminds you it is always there. Ryland felt it as attention. Something was looking for something, and it was getting closer. Dova came off her perch like a lit fuse. She hit the floor, bounced off the wall, launched herself at the viewport on the far side of the lab, the wide observation port that looked out toward Deep System. She pressed both front paws flat against the glass and stared, her whole body rigid, her crest standing straight up, her tail lashing hard enough to knock a sample case off the nearest shelf. Then she screamed. It was not a sound Ryland had heard from her before. It was enormous for her size, a sound that started in her chest and went through the walls, and it was not fear. It was recognition. Pure, electric, overwhelming recognition. The way you might scream if someone you thought was gone forever suddenly walked back through the door. The largest elder turned toward the station. The second pulse was different from the first. Focused. Specific. It moved through Ryland's lab like a warm current and went directly to Dova, and Dova went still the moment it touched her. Perfectly still. All the frantic energy stopped at once. She stood at the viewport with her paws on the glass and her eyes wide and copper bright, and she looked like something that had just heard its name spoken for the very first time. The channel opened without request. The largest elder spoke directly to the station, not on any radio frequency, but the station's communications system handled it anyway, routing the meaning through the translation matrix as best it could. The voice, if it was a voice, was not loud. It was deep the way the inside of a planet is deep. The translation came out rough and partial. You carry one of ours. A hatchling. Alive. This is unexpected. Fan, in the operations center, looked at Ryland on the internal feed. Talk to it, she said quietly. Ryland talked to it. He told the elder everything, with the patient precision of a scientist who respected the truth even when it was complicated. The survey crates. The warm egg. The hatching. The 6 months of careful study and warmer attachment. He said he did not know where the egg came from, or how it had ended up in a sample shipment on the edge of explored space. He said Dova was healthy and growing, and had never been treated as anything other than a living creature deserving of care. Then, because it was the most honest thing he could say, he told the elder he would return her if that was right. If that was what she needed. He would not pretend the choice was his to make. The elder was silent for a long moment. Long enough that Bowen, watching on the ops feed, quietly gripped the edge of his console. Then the elder said, still through the partial translation, "What does the hatchling call this place?" Rylan looked at Dova. She had turned from the viewport. She was looking at him, not at the elder, not at the massive shapes outside the glass. At him. Her copper eyes were full of something that had no word in any language he had studied, though he had tried to find one. He said, slowly, "She doesn't call it anything. She's still learning to speak." "Ask her," the elder said. Rylan crouched down. He was at eye level with Dova. She blinked once, slow and deliberate, the way she did when she was thinking through something important. He said her name, quietly, the way you say a name when you want someone to know you mean it. Dova opened her jaw. She had been practicing for months. Every late night in the empty lab, shaping a word her mouth was not designed to hold. Getting closer. Almost ready. The elder waited. The Kareth fleet waited. Vantage Station held its breath. And Dova looked at Rylan, and she was ready. The word she had chosen was not the first word Rylan had tried to teach her. He had tried danger early on, because it seemed practical. Then safe, because she needed to know the difference. Then stay. Then good. Then no. All the useful small words that made daily life work. She had learned the concepts behind all of them. She had simply chosen not to repeat any of them. She had heard the one she wanted on her 4th day of life. A junior engineer named what had been arguing with the station's resource allocation system in the corridor outside the lab, losing badly, and had finally slammed his hand on the panel and said the word with the kind of feeling that made it mean more than its letters. Dova had been watching through the lab window and had turned her head sharply, copper eyes bright, like she had heard something click into place. She had been practicing it ever since. It was the word humans reached for when they were standing in front of something bigger than themselves and not backing down. When they were tired and still going. When someone tried to take something that mattered and the answer was simple and final. It was not a fancy word. It was not a long word. But it carried weight the way short things sometimes do, the way a single stone can hold an entire door shut. The word was OURS. Dova said it in the lab with Rylan crouched in front of her and the elder waiting outside, and 27 Kareth warships holding position 1,000 kilometers away. Rylan did not speak for a moment. He was not sure he could. Then the elder responded. Not in words. What came through the station walls was warmth, a resonance, a frequency that had no translation in any database because it was not a language in the way languages were usually defined. It was older than language. It was the sound a species makes when it has lived long enough to know that the universe occasionally gets something right. It felt, to every person on the station, like approval. Like something immense and ancient was genuinely, deeply pleased. Bowen said afterward that it felt like getting the answer correct on a test you had not known you were taking. Finn said it felt like sunlight. Nara said she had to sit down for a moment because her knees simply made that decision for her. The elder spoke to the Kareth fleet. Not in translated signal. In direct transmission, Kareth language, delivered without preamble or diplomatic cushioning. The station's system caught most of it. The translation was imperfect, but the meaning was not. This station carries a recognized Solari hatchling. The hatchling has claimed this place and the people in it. Under the accord of first voice, which you know, this claim is binding. You are in a protected zone. You will withdraw from this system. You will file no further resource claims in this region. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. Acknowledge and withdraw. Admiral Gru responded. He tried 3 arguments in quick succession. Council jurisdiction, the contested zones provision, the question of whether a 6-month-old creature of unverified status could legally invoke an ancient accord. He made each point crisply, professionally, the way someone makes points when they know the points are not going to work, but feel better for having made them. The elder waited for him to finish. Then the elder said, in Galactic Standard this time, clearly, for the record, we do not repeat ourselves. The Kareth fleet was quiet for 1 full minute. Then the first ship began to move. Then the second. Then they all moved, slow, organized, without panic, in the direction of the transit corridor that would take them out of the system. They did not fire. They did not broadcast any further transmissions. They simply went, the way something very large goes when it has decided that the ground it chose to stand on is no longer worth standing on. In the operations center, nobody said anything for a moment. Then Bowen let out a breath that he seemed to have been holding since the Kareth fleet first arrived, and it was a very long breath. Finn stood at the main display and watched the warships reduce to transit signatures on the long-range scanner, and her face was the careful, measured face of a commander who had not allowed herself to feel anything yet because she was not sure it was over. When the last signature faded, she allowed herself one short exhale. Rylan was still in the lab. He sat down on the floor because the floor was available and his legs had stopped consulting him before making decisions. Dova climbed into his lap with the easy confidence of an animal that had never once doubted she was welcome there. She settled. She rumbled, that low, warm, engine idling sound that she had made since her first week of life. He put his hands on her scales. She was warm the way she had always been warm. Steady, patient. Outside, the 7 Elder WIRMS held position in a slow, wide orbit around the station. They were not threatening. They were not guarding. They were simply present, the way old things are present when they want you to know they have not forgotten where you are. Rylan looked at Dova. You practiced that for 6 months, he said. Dova blinked once and looked away, as though the topic was not particularly interesting now that it was settled. He laughed. It surprised him. The laugh came out before he decided to let it. And it was a real one, tired and relieved and slightly undone. Dova turned her head back and regarded him with one copper eye, her expression the precise look of a creature that finds humans deeply puzzling but has decided to keep them anyway. He could live with that. 3 days after the Kareth fleet withdrew, the human reinforcement ships arrived. 7 vessels, fast and well-armed, came out of transit drive in tight formation with their weapons hot and their communications open. Their lead commander hailed the station with the clipped, efficient tone of someone who had spent 9 days in transit expecting to arrive at a battle and was now trying to process the sensor reading that showed 27 Kareth ships already gone and 7 unclassified objects of considerable size orbiting the station in a slow, calm loop. Commander Finn answered him. She explained the situation. There was a pause while the commander worked through the explanation, then a longer pause while he worked through it again. He eventually said, so the dragon talked them down. Finn looked at Rylan. Rylan looked at Dova, who was at that moment attempting to pull a thermal coupling off the wall of the lab because it was copper-colored, and she had recently developed an interest in copper-colored things. More or less, Finn said. The reinforcement ships held position and waited to see what happened next. That was perhaps the most accurate summary of what everyone was doing. What happened next was the Elder. Communication between Rylan and the largest Solari WIRM had continued since the withdrawal of the Kareth fleet, slowly, incompletely, filtered through a translation matrix that kept apologizing for gaps in its reference database. But the meaning came through well enough, and what the Elder communicated over those 3 days built into something Rylan had not anticipated. The Solari migration was passing through. They were not claiming territory. They had no interest in the gas giant or its minerals or the station or anything in the system except the creature that had hatched here and the people who had kept her alive. They had been searching, not urgently, because Solari elders did not do urgency in the way shorter-lived species understood it, but consistently, across a long time, for the egg that had gone missing in a cargo accident 3 years before Dova hatched. They had found her. She was alive. She had spoken. The bond she had formed was real and recognized under Solari tradition, which was older than most galactic law and treated with considerably more seriousness by species that knew their history. The Elder proposed an accord. Vantage Station would be designated a Solari waypoint, a formal mark in the oldest living catalog of protected places in the galaxy. It meant no fleet, no government, no consortium of resource extraction corporations would legally, practically, or culturally be willing to challenge the station's existence. Not because the station had a weapon that could stop them, because the Solari would know, and the Solari remembered everything. In return, the station would maintain the well-being of the hatchling for as long as she chose to remain. Report her development. Keep her safe. Finn signed the accord in the station's main bay with the Elder's acknowledgement transmitted through the walls of the room in that warm, resonant way that made people's eyes go slightly unfocused. It was the shortest and most significant document in the station's history. Bowen framed a copy. The human reinforcement commander, still holding position outside, sent a message to his fleet command that took 3 drafts to write. The final version said simply, "Situation resolved. No casualties. Diplomatic development of significant galactic scope. Requesting clarification on whether this falls under exploration protocol or first contact protocol or something else entirely. Standing by." Fleet Command took 2 days to respond. Their answer was, "We are also not sure. Congratulations." Ryland filed his own report, thorough, detailed, scientifically precise. He noted Dova's empathic sensitivity, her language acquisition, her chosen word, and the circumstance of its use. He noted that a 6-month-old Solari hatchling had, by speaking one human word, invoked an ancient accord that moved a war fleet. He noted that she had chosen that word specifically, not from the words he had tried to teach her, but from the ones she had observed humans use in moments of real meaning. He ended the report with a note that was not quite scientific. She did not say the word to the elder or to the Kareth. She said it to me. I believe she was telling me what she had already decided, not asking what she should decide. She had decided on her 4th day of life. The rest was just waiting until the moment was large enough to be worth saying it clearly. In the days that followed, the Elder and the other Solari WYRMS completed their preparations. They were migrating toward a region of deep space that the station's charts did not reach. One by one, over 2 days, they moved to the transit corridor and disappeared. Each departure marked by a pulse of that warm resonance, quieter each time, the way a fire settles rather than dies. The last to go was the Elder. Ryland watched from the observation deck. Dova was beside him, sitting on the wide railing with her tail wrapped once around the support post, watching the enormous shape of the Elder grow smaller against the star field. Her copper eyes were very still. She did not scream the way she had when they arrived. She just watched. The Elder paused at the edge of the transit corridor. The final pulse came, not warm this time, but long. A single slow resonance that said something without words, the way a parent says something when they leave a child somewhere safe. Not goodbye, more like, "We know where you are. We will always know where you are." Then the Elder was gone. Dova sat on the railing and looked at the empty dark where something vast had just been. She was still for a while. Then she turned around, dropped off the railing onto the deck, walked to where Ryland was sitting, and bit his sandwich in half. He had forgotten he was holding a sandwich. She chewed, thoroughly and without apology, and then sat next to his foot and looked out at the stars as though the whole thing had been her idea from the start. As though she had arranged everything exactly as she wanted it. The hatching, the station, the fleet, the elders, the accord, and was now simply satisfied with how it had turned out. Bowen came out onto the deck and leaned on the railing and looked at the star field, and then at the half-eaten sandwich, and then at Dova. "Is she going to keep doing that?" he said. "Eating my food," Ryland said. "Saving the station." Ryland looked at Dova. She had pressed her head against his ankle and closed her eyes. She was rumbling, that low, steady, comfortable engine sound, the one she had made since the very first days, the one that felt like warmth and like certainty and like something that had decided this was home and was not revisiting the decision. "Probably," Ryland said. He looked out at the place where the elders had been, at the dark between stars that was no longer empty in the way it had been before, at the gas giant turning slowly below the station, at everything that had changed in 6 months and everything that had not. Then he looked at Dova, small and silver gold and deeply asleep against his foot, and said the word she had chosen, quietly, to no one in particular. "Ours." The station hummed around them. The stars held their positions. And on Vantage Station, 3,000 and some odd humans went about their work, protected not by any weapon or treaty written by committee, but by a dragon the size of a large dog who had listened carefully, chosen well, and said exactly the right word at exactly the right moment. It was, all things considered, a very human outcome.